Qual o significado do público para o cinema?
Sem o público não tem sentido. O público é o complemento de tudo.
Que é muito rico contar uma história para pessoas tão diferentes e que vão receber de forma também muito diferente.
O medo, a emoção, a gargalhada, isso é cinema. Isso é o público quem dá.
Nós, artistas, fazemos tudo com esse intuito, de conseguir com que o público vá além de si mesmo.
Não há nada como vocês.
É para você que as histórias são criadas. É por você que o cinema existe. Nossa homenagem a quem mais inspira o cinema, o público.
Olá, bom dia, buenos dias, good morning. I'm happy to present this activity this morning, which is actually the first panel from REACH. REACH was created last year inside BrLab as a seminar taught to discuss important issues from the film industry, especially those related to the audience matters. Since 2017, BrLab organizes some activities on audience design. I should say that Torino Film Lab is an important partner and was an important partner organizing the first two editions of this workshop. The first edition was in 2017, the second edition in 2019, last year, already dedicated to the projects that are part of Projeto Paradiso Incubator. And this year we are promoting the third edition of this workshop again, together with Projeto Paradiso, with Fernanda Del Nido, me, and Sara Calderon as tutors and consultants. Also, the workshop is connected to many other contents that we present at BrLab. And during this trajectory, during these years, I'm really happy to understand and to see that many professionals here in Brazil have connected and discovered some ideas from audience design through BrLab. And that's why in this situation, I couldn't not have organized one talk and one panel with this issue. I should say that BrLab is sponsored by Projeto Paradiso, by SPCine, Prefeitura de São Paulo, and Programa Ibermídia. And we also have the important support of many institutions, and especially Global Filmes, Vitrine Filmes, and many others. I'm also very happy to have Benjamin Cölle this morning. This activity is also connected with the BrLab development workshop, also the audience design workshop, and we also have this activity made in partnership with Locarno Industry Academy, which is this workshop promoted by Locarno in many countries, and here in BrLab we are happy to be their partners. So welcome everybody. This year I had the opportunity to be a student on TFL Next, Torino Film Lab Next, on the online edition of an audience design workshop in a great group. And I had the joy and it was very great to meet Benjamin Cölle, which was my professor, my teacher, which is a great audience designer and knows very well how to explain this important matter. So please come in the screen, Benjamin. Thank you so much for being at BrLab. Hopefully, hello. Hopefully nice in the future, yeah. Hopefully in the future you can come personally to São Paulo, which is always better. And just to say that I'm staying backstage, moderating the Q&A together with my staff, the amazing staff we have. And Benjamin will be here. Then at the end, I come back and we are making this Q&A. So if you have questions, you can make during the presentation, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So thank you very much, Rafael. Thank you, BrLab, for inviting me. Everybody who is in behind the scenes as well. It's very well organized. I really feel you're really professional with all this. I'm happy to join you from Berlin today. If this pandemic has one thing that is good, that people can really come together from all over the world. Unfortunately, yes, I would love to be in Brazil right now because here the weather is very cold outside. But nevertheless, I'm very happy to join you in this workshop on audience design, which will take approximately 1.5 hours. I will give a little introduction into audience design, then also share some case studies that were both co-productions between Europe and South America. And then I will have a little bit time for questions. So please, if you have questions, just write them down in the chat or like in the comments in YouTube, or like keep them in mind and write them after my presentation, because we will answer them after my presentation, which will take around an hour. And then I will go back and answer your questions. So yeah, the topic is audience design. I can now you can show my screen. I will have a full screen now, so I'm concentrating on my presentation, which is called Exploring the Worlds of Narrative and Audience. I will talk about what I mean with that, obviously now. First of all, I would like to talk a little bit shortly about myself. I have an academic background in cultural studies and post-colonial studies. Then I was working as a producer for film and cross-media, mostly documentaries, but also fiction. And then slowly got into the transmedia production or cross-media production, meaning telling stories across different platforms. And then I was working since 2016 as a lecturer and researcher at university in Potsdam, Germany. It's called Film University Babelsberg, Konrad Wolf. It's a film school, one of the big film schools in Germany. where I'm, as I said, teaching film production but also research. And my research project is around audience design. So I'm not only practicing audience design as an audience designer within the Torino Film Lab audience design program, but I'm also researching it as an academic. So I have, so to say, two roles in the field of audience design. Yeah, and ever since I was myself trained at Torino Film Lab audience design program in 2014, I am consulting as well, audience design projects as part of the Torino Film Lab, but also as a freelance consultant. So sometimes filmmakers approach me and say, look, can you help me with my project? And then I do also freelance consultancies. So, so much to me. I would like to start to introduce audience design by going back into time a little bit, and namely into the 90s and 20s, and looking at where audience studies basically started. Audience studies is like the academic, let's say, way to look at audience. Everything that was done around audiences. What is an audience? Where do they come from? It basically started all in the 90s and 20s and 1930s when the mass society or mass culture thesis arose. So people were thinking about media and the relationship between media and society in terms of that there's this mass audience. Like, because, I mean, as you know, film was the first mass medium. So people thought of the audience as this big group of people that was running into the cinema. Also there was obviously very much informed by the propaganda that surrounded the Second World War all over the world, and afterwards, when the Cold War started as well, it was very much also in academia, and especially in, let's say, the critical academia. It was talked about as the cultural industry having a negative effect in terms of influencing the masses to do something bad, and also like to have propaganda that obviously informed all the cruelties that were done in the Second World War. So there was a very much critical stance on what cultural industry is doing, and also what like the effects of this mass culture is doing towards the people. And it became clear, but quite soon then, already by the middle of the 20th century, by everybody who was thinking about audience and researched audience, that this idea of a mass audience is actually like not a very good one, because it's not really describing the audience accurately in terms of top-down effects. So there is the bad mass culture that is then directly influencing the masses and makes them to do something. And the more people were thinking about audiences and the more people were studying them, they realized quite soon that actually this is not true. It's like very, very different. And I think that's a very important starting point. I like to quote the study done by Winnig in '63 already. When he looked at the audience of the film The Man with the Golden Arm. It's a film about a drug addict played by Frank Sinatra. And what he did was he interviewed people who saw this film and asked them what they thought about the film. And what actually came out of the study already was that each of these audience groups that looked at the film perceived the film very differently. For example, people who have an history of drug consumption themselves were thinking, for example, wow, that's amazing, like seeing a star like Frank Sinatra playing a drug addict, that's really empowering for me. While, let's say, middle-class people that were thinking of drug addicts as someone being in the streets, they thought like, oh, that's disgusting. Why do you promote drug abuse with a star like that? So in a way, it really showed that each of these people that Winnig interviewed were really like looking at the film in a very different way, like consonant with their own tendency system. That's how he called it. Like the way we experience our daily life, all the experiences we made in our lives, that's also the way we look at stories. That's the way we look at film. And that's very different, obviously, because we are very different people. So this idea of that, I think audience design is something that we try to really start talking about very much from the very beginning, is saying to filmmakers, saying to producers, saying to distributors, look, try to understand your audience because they're very, very different.
Hey, Ben, sorry.
Yeah?
Your screen is totally black. Maybe
Really?
if you close the presentation and come back. Yes, we were trying to advise you, so
Okay.
come back with the PDF.
Okay.
So, Mari?
Maybe I shouldn't do full screen.
Yes, I think
Maybe that's better.
You shouldn't. Yeah.
Do you see this now? Yeah, that's also the problem, because when I do full screen, I don't see the comments as well. That's why I didn't see that you were writing to me. So do you see it now?
Not yet.
So now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so I leave it like this then, yeah?
Okay.
Okay. Great. So sorry about that. So basically what I said is that it became clear by the middle of the 20th century that the effects of media on mass audiences are not accurately described as top-down effects. This is what I just described can be identified as a paradigm shift. So that and that led already to the acknowledgement that audiences may read or use media in different, surprising, or even aberrant ways. And that's really the starting point of audience design, that we really try to understand these audiences as a diverse group of people across categories such as race, class, and gender, who are everywhere around us, as individuals, groups, and communities. So in that sense, the audience can be described as a diverse multitude of various identities with diverse backgrounds. This is taken from a book called Audience Transformation, Shifting Audience Positions in Late Modernity from 2014. I think it's a very interesting and very good book that I would really recommend to everybody of you to take a look at it. But as I said, this idea is not it's not like a revolutionary new one. It's already since the beginning, when people started to study audiences of films, which is the main field that we are talking about in audience design, even though I think it's also applicable to other, let's say, media formats. When people started to study these audiences, they realized that quite soon that people are really different, that actually it is not this mass audience that we are always considering. And I think that a lot of people still today, when they produce or write films, they don't think about their audiences so much as a diverse group of people. They think of the people that, you know, might go to the cinema at one point, and they don't think about them. And that's really something that we try to like challenge with audience design. Because if we want to have audience engagement, and that's what I always like to say, we need to engage with the audience. So before having audience engagement, I think we as filmmakers, as producers, directors, writers, distributors, we need to really engage with the audience first. We need to look at these people. We need to try to understand these people, and not just like a general idea of the audience, but always related to the story we are looking into, the story that we are writing, the story that we are developing. So we call it audience, as other people call it. And why do we call it audience design? I think I mean, audience building, audience engagement is something you can think of as well. But we call it audience design, and why do we do that? Why do we call it audience design? First of all, it comes from a sociolinguistic theory from Adam Bell that says that basically speakers adjust their speech primarily towards that of their audience in order to express solidarity or intimacy with them, or away from their audience's speech to express distance. So basically what Adam Bell in 1940, and that's where the first time the term audience design came about, is that we are different to people. To each person we're talking differently in a way, because we expect something else. So I would talk obviously to the baker that I order my bread differently than to the professor or to you that I'm trying to convince about something. So basically our speech is differently to other people. So that's already kind of the idea of audience design as well, that we actually need to think of our story in different ways, the way we think of who we talk, like the story, like who we tell the story to, like who we are, like showing this film, people will react differently to. So that's where the term audience design came into play for the first time. But then as well, design thinking. And I think that's also another reason why, let's say years later, after Bell, the word audience design for the first time, it was taken from Reno Film as a theme for a new program that they started, is because of design thinking. Because design thinking, as one of the most widespread approaches to solve problems and develop new ideas within collaborative creative teams, is very much part of the methodology of audience design. So we are going in different iterations through different processes that starts with inspiration, goes over to ideation, and then ends in implementation. And these iterative circles that I will talk about later on as well, and more in more detail, are very crucial to that process. So we are basically trying to understand a process, and if we don't understand it, we just try to understand it again and again and again until we are in a moment that we think, okay, now I think we understood. And circles, because the next circle would be like observing. If we start with understanding, then we observing, and if we see that while observing we want to go back to understanding, we can do that as well. So it's a dynamic process that runs through all these different circles, as you can see it here, that also audience design is very much inspired by. Basically to always think of these creative processes as something we can go through again and again, like asking the same questions maybe again and again, because maybe we find something new, and we are very much agile in this process, so to say. So it's already like design thinking entails a lot of things that audience design has, and basically as it is defined in the book that I will share with you the link to, which you can download on the homepage of Torino Film Lab. It's written by Valeria Richter and Lena Thiele. It's called Audience Design: An Introduction. And they define audience design as the process of creating audience awareness and engagement around films from an early stage of development through a story-based and multi-angle approach. So what we can say about audience design is, first of all, it's a collaborative practice. And I think that's very crucial, because audience design is really something that brings together people around a certain film project from a very early stage of development. And that means we're sitting around a table with writers, directors, producers, maybe already sometimes distributors if they're already on board, or world sales if they're already on board, and anyone else like co-producers, maybe commissioning editors if they are involved. Everybody who is involved in this project in a decisive role sits around one table, and we can start discussing and having ideas about the project. So it is really like about doing it together. As I says, it brings together authors, directors, producers, distributors, PR, and sales. Audience design provides a methodology and framework, but it's very open. So there are many ways to do it. And you will see this later on in the case studies. It's very important that audience design is never thought of as some, let's say, testament or some practice that you have to follow, like, and then you can only do it right or wrong. No, it's just a framework. It should inspire you, and there's lots of different tools that you can use, but we always thought of audience design as a toolbox, and you can then decide which tools you want to use so they work for your project. Really don't think of it as something you have to follow, or you can learn in a way that you can then, like, say, now I'm a master of audience design. It really is something that you learn also by doing, and that you also can really do in the way you do it, you like to do it. For example, my experience is that normally you do it also together with two people. Like, normally audience design consultancies are made by two people at least, sometimes more, who are the audience designers, the consultants, and each of these consultants brings in his or her different approach towards audience design. So it's very interesting that sometimes, like, for example, me, I'm very much into story. I really like to explore the story very deeply, but then I work together with a colleague of mine, and maybe she's much more into strategy, and she really likes to focus on goals and on, like, implementation, and that's a very good process. So I think everybody can use his or her like talents in a way the most, and that's also part of this idea of the collaborative practice, because we're sitting together and everybody can bring in his or her speciality. Like, obviously a distributor has another view on the project than the author or director. And only with this whole, let's say, mixture of everybody, it really becomes richer, and the process becomes stronger than before. And that's already like one of the most important effects. As I said, I'm researching audience design, and I'm doing interviews with people who did the audience design consultancies. And what I mostly hear from people is already the situation, sitting together, talking about the project, taking the time to talk about your project. As you know, as a producer or distributor, you have lots of different projects, and already having the moment of sitting together for this project around a table and talking about it is very, very nice, and already is a very important effect of audience design. So basically, in a nutshell, audience design really means, as you will also find this this graphic in the book, audience design. Basically, normally you see the film production process as starting with development funding, financing, going over to production, to post-production, festival release, and public release, and then long-term, let's say, VOD, SVOD release. And what people normally think of audiences, as you can see here, the audience we start to engage with the audience, what we call marketing and distribution. So we start engaging with the audience in the post-production phase, and then over the festival release, and then suddenly the audience appears, like miraculously, let's say, suddenly after we release the film. And basically, audience design thinks of it differently. We think of starting to engage with the audience already in a much earlier stage of development, because we think of it already starting during development financing. So that's why we always say in audience design that we should start as early as possible, because already in the development and financing phase, we start to really think of the audience, start to engage with the audience, and then having an active audience by the time of release. So that's the whole idea of audience design in a nutshell, really, to first start early, to involve people, to involve everybody, and to have really like a story-driven approach. This is really important, because we really always think of the story first. And because sometimes directors or writers come to me and say, look, you are the guys that changed my story because you think it doesn't have an audience potential, so I have to change the story to please audiences. And I say always, no, that's exactly not what audience design is about. We really take the story seriously. We really want to have the creative freedom of writers, directors to the fullest extent, but then we take the story and we try to analyze it, and then we try to find people who might engage with it. That's the real, that's the idea of audience design. It's not we find your audience or we design your audience, as sometimes people also misunderstand it, and that's why sometimes people come back to me and say audience design is not a very good, let's say, term for it, because people might misunderstand it and think we design an audience. But that's really not what it is. Think of audience design more in the terms of design thinking, in a way that we are taking the story and then we are looking into different possibilities, who could be engaged with this story, and where and in which platform at what time. That's what we are doing. We're not changing the story. We are taking the story as a starting point, to then look who could be interested in it. And the earlier we start, the better it is, basically. So, as I said, if you have questions about this, please don't forget about them. I will answer them later. Basically, this is the process of audience design. It starts with the phase which we call discover. It continues with the phase develop, then the phase design, and then the phase deliver. I will go into these different phases in more detail now, but as you see already here, it has these iterative circles again. So basically, you start to discover, then you go to the phase develop. But if you realize in the developing phase that you still need to discover a little bit more, that's not a problem. And that's actually part of the process. You go back to the discover phase, because maybe the project changed. And the same is about the design phase. So if you realize when you're in the design phase, oh, we should go back to the develop or to the discover phase, that's totally possible, and actually needed sometimes, because you realize in the moment you design, oh, we should go back. So that's this idea of the iterations, that you go, that you only go to the next phase as long as you are always open to go back to the one before. So the first phase, called discover, what we do there is like, we really take a look at the story. We really discover the story, as I said before. And if the story is, if the film or the story is basically just a beginning, in the beginning it is just a script or a first idea, that's totally fine. That's why the discover phase might be throughout the whole process important, because the story might change from the first idea to the final script. Then the film will be shot, produced, and then it will be edited, and then it will be in post-production. Maybe the story is changed already in this point. So we have to be agile in that way, that we adapt the process, that we can apply our methodology to a changing story over the course of the production. Nevertheless, the discover phase always entails a 360-degree view, as we call it. So we look at the story from all kind of different angles, like from all the different perspectives that are part of that process. As I said, the collaborative process of different people involving the project. We start a team collaboration. We really start to talk about also like how we are talking with each other. We really set this moment of collaboration. That is a very important one, as I said before, to really start working as a team. And then really the first thing that we always do in the consultancy is asking, what are your goals? Because it really depends on the goals where the whole strategy and design process is going afterwards. Because sometimes, you have a small, let's say, documentary that has a political agenda. And if the agenda of the filmmakers is to really do something in terms of political change, to, let's say, start a discourse on climate change or contribute to a discourse of climate change, it's a complete different goal than having the trajectory to have as many people in the cinema as possible, for example. Or if you like to, let's say, make an impact on the festival circuit and win prizes, it's a different thing than trying to become the most successful film in cinemas in your home territory. So it really is a different thing depending on the goal. So that's why we always start with a goal setting. to have a focus set for the consultancy. And then we also start with audiences. So who are the people? Where are they? Why are they engaging with the film? It's like a first draft of audiences, and it's just like, as I said, in a team collaborative way. There's different tools, as we say in the discover phase. We explore the story world, as I always call it, like the world of the story that entails discourses, like themes and topics. It entails like we do a SWOT analysis. That can be a tool that we do in this phase. We look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then we also look at this audience world, as I call it. We look at different audience groups. We look at personas. We look at communities, and who could be interested in the film, like as a first draft of audience groups. As I said, the second phase is develop. So then we start really taking these findings of this discovery phase and develop a first, let's say, and draft of where we want to go with this audience design program, audience design consultancy. We start with trying to understand the core of the story. What really is the story about in terms of emotions, in terms of values, also in terms of themes and topics. We look at the assets that the story might have, like, for example, if it has a special cinematography, if it has a special setting, or like some genre aspects that we want like to point out. But also in terms of director's background, what the director or writer has done before. Maybe there's an interesting cinematographer, or like there's a music artist that contributes with the music. All the different aspects that we have concerning the story will come into play here as well. And we're trying to connect the story and the audience in a more deep way. We look at reference projects like films that might be similar. We look with a more broader view into the different audiences, but also within the different territories, because obviously, as I said, not only in terms of each city has different people, but also in a broader and a global context, we really have to talk about different territories, obviously, because also concerning when the film will be released. Like if it's, for example, a co-production between Brazil and Germany, I'm just making this up now. Obviously, we will release the film in Brazil and we will release the film in Germany. But I think the distributor from Brazil knows their audiences better than I do in Brazil, obviously. Like and the Brazilian producer doesn't know the audience as well as I do in Germany. So we really have to be specific here as well, like in terms of really trying to understand the different territories, and maybe make some research about what kind of films were done, where we're working before in these territories. What are the trends? What is the society talking about that in these territories? Because it's very different. Obviously, like you in Brazil right now have a different government than we have in Germany, and the society is changing since Bolsonaro is in power. While in Germany we have a complete different discourse regarding this. So, for example, a film that would talk about a specific Brazilian topic, but then would maybe premiere in a European festival, would be still interesting for us. For example, Aquarius, which talks about gentrification, could be something interesting for people in Berlin, because gentrification is something we experience here as well, but in a different way than you do in Brazil. So obviously we have to really be detailed here, like to really trying to connect the story and the audience in a more deep way than in the first phase. So to really be specific here, both in terms of story and both in terms of audience. The third phase, as I said, is design. And this is the phase where we really start with the strategy work, where we are really going into building the strategy. So we're talking about the different communication platforms. We talk about the different distribution platforms. and we're trying to connect, like go even deeper with that connection between story and audience, but be very concrete about it. So we talk about a time plan. We considering the goals again. From the beginning, we think of, are we still on the same page? That's very important here as well. Is this process now going in the direction that we thought it should go? Because we think about the goals again. Is this really something that we want to do here? Is that correct? Are we on the same page? Still, what kind of actions we are thinking of? Like we're getting really concrete here. Like what are the concrete actions that we're trying to do in order to engage audiences on the different distribution platforms, on the different communication platforms, and we take everything in that we collected from before. So we take the audience, the communities that we identify, we take the territories, and we bring together the discourse, values, and emotions that we identified as core of the story, to then channel the communication, and that the film is very much like also communicated in a way that it fits to the different territories, but also that it still serves the film in its own right. And that's why it's very important to have as well directors part of the process, because we then ask the directors, look, do you feel that this film, that your story is still communicated in a way? The producers, like, because sometimes you know how it is in a creative process. You have the wild ideas, but then suddenly you realize, oh, actually, is this still the film that we are talking about? And you really have to be careful, because as I said, we're really looking into a story-driven approach here. We don't want to change the story. We want to make the story still really like just thriving towards the story and being true to the story. So this is something we have to ask here as well. Obviously, very important, the fourth phase, the deliver phase. This is basically where we are talking about delivery. So where we are monitoring also directly like the time plan. So when is the social media campaign to start? And then also to really look at the social media campaign and learn from this, again, with this iteration process, that we are maybe starting the delivery of the social media campaign, for example, but we realize something that is working or not working, and we then maybe adjust our strategy, because we realize while we deliver the strategy that it actually isn't working, maybe, or maybe it does work, and we put more emphasis on this small idea that we thought would not be so important, but then we realize it works really well, and we continue with it. For example, one consultancy I made was about a film called Tel Aviv on Fire. It's a film about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and hummus somehow plays an important role in that film, because hummus as a sign that both Palestinians and Israelis really like, and it kind of brings together these two these seemingly opposing groups, but they both really love hummus. And we started to deliver these little recipes of hummus recipes that we put on the cinema tickets on the back, and this really this was really like successful, and people really liked that. So we really understood that this really works, and we put more emphasis on this theme of hummus and used it more in the communication campaign. So these are things that you really have to learn to really like monitor as well while you are delivering your strategy, that you maybe some things work, some things work not, and that you also keep your team informed. Another thing, for example, I will now talk about case studies soon, is that you also then really involve partners that might not be involved before. For example, world sales that might step in a later phase, and they can and to produce material for them, and that they can use that for their work. So it's not only the audiences in a way that are then going to see the film in the cinema, but also the, let's say, B2B audiences like world sales or cinema or local distributors that might see the film on a festival and then consider to buy it for their own territory. So you also have to think of them as audience in terms of then how to make them interested in the film on that level. So this whole deliver can have lots of different aspects, but basically it really is about having the actions in the right time and in the right territory. So that's this like triangle that I put up here between time, action, and territories. Basically, you have to be very specific about what to do what, at what time, in what territory, basically. And also, as I said, in terms of audience, that you have to be very specific and detailed about this. Obviously, important as well is a debrief. So we really try to finish this this whole process by also debriefing, analyzing, feedbacking, and maybe realizing that we did something wrong. So be open from the beginning to the very end, and also be not afraid to say, look, I think it didn't work really well, or maybe we should adjust something, because we can only learn from these things, to really try to understand what happened, what worked, what didn't work, because we, as I said, we are on the constant iterations, as it is always, it's almost never too late to start with audience design, and it's definitely never too early to start with it. That's one of the things, and we have to really adjust our strategy to the specific production phase. What I mean with that is, here you see this iterative cycles, and these are the cycles that you run through. Like, for example, if you would start with audience design in the story development, we go to the discover, to the develop and design phase, and then we deliver it. And we go again in the rough cut phase. For example, the film might have changed really because some locations didn't work out that we thought would work out. Maybe some cast changed, and maybe the edit changed so much that the story really changed. So we have to rediscover, redevelop, redesign, and be open for that. And while the film is then released on the festivals, we go again into the design phase, because here we have new audiences. We have maybe, as I said, B2B audiences like world sales and distributors that we have to then obviously put another narrative to about the story, because it just was released on a, let's say, important festival, and that definitely changes the whole idea of the film, how it's also maybe talked about during the festival, changes the whole narrative, not only how the film is like seen by the audience, but also how the film is seen within the industry, so to say. So we have to be open to maybe rediscover, redevelop, and redesign again. And that goes again for the theatrical distribution. And these are just some examples to really point out that we have to be constantly agile in that way, how we think about the story, how we think about the film. So we don't have a too narrow idea, but to have really like a pool of ideas that we can then look into again, use, maybe put into the trash bin, or maybe take out of the trash bin again, because we realize, oh, this idea actually works now much better because the film maybe changed in a way. And always have the story in mind, and go through these different phases again and again. So just to show you a little bit what we did in the recent let's say year, I just gonna tell you shortly. We only have around 10 minutes left, so I will go through this case studies a bit briefly, but you can then ask questions. I prepared one fiction film and one documentary, so we have two different aspects. The first case study is a film called Las Mil y Una. It's as I said, a fiction film, a co-production between Argentina and Germany, produced by Varsovia Films. Lucia Javari was the producer, and Diego Dubrovsky, and co-producer was Authentica Films in Germany. When we did the consultancy, the film was in a rough cut stage. So this consultancy was basically done in Torino in 2019, in September 2019, so almost like a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, and we didn't know where the film will go. So this was part of a training as well. It was part of an audience design training, and so it was basically a training of new audience designers. In the same time, it was a consultancy for this film, and we used this film as a case study. So Isona Atmela, myself, Catherine Chan, Lucia Javari, the producer of the film, Cölle Cölle and Julia Claudia Mascari, they took part in the consultancy. And they were trained as audience designers. In the same time, we were making consultancy for the film. As I said, we had a 160-minute rough cut of the film at that time. And just to go through shortly, this is the basically what you then deliver. It's the audience design strategy that you then deliver, but it's thought as now I always call it a logbook, because it's meant to be something that you can continuously work on. That's never like a finish. That's why you also see the version number here. This is the version number 3 of this document. And the idea is that you normally work on that on a Google Drive or on some other platform where you can collaboratively work on it, and you just use it and you continuously work on it and use it as basically your resource. But it's not finished in a way. It's always in process. So that is the version that we produced in September 2019. So as you see, what it entails, this strategy paper always is also the idea that people can then, who are coming, like for example, as a world sales to the project, that they get a general idea what audience design really is. So you give the film facts, you give a short introduction, what audience design really is. You make a summary of the whole strategy, so people can read in one chapter shortly what this is about. And then you present the project. And this is all the, let's say, that's the result of the work we did in the 4 days we were together in Torino. We thought about different log lines, different short synopsises, we identified the core of the story. Also important, the context of the story, what is the project history. As I said before, the main goals, the secondary goals, here it was, for this film, at that time, it was securing an international premiere at an A festival, attach a world sales company that take care of the films, have an international festival run, push the career of the director, and build a reputation for the production company. That was the most important goals that we identified there. And that basically also shaped the strategy work. So we identified the themes and topics of the film. We looked into the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then we went into the different audiences in a more detailed and deep way. So the festival audience is basically differently, obviously, where we thought of different possibilities. We thought maybe the best would be a world premiere at Berlinale, because it's a project that was also co-produced by World Cinema Fund, because this whole consultancy was also in collaboration with World Cinema Fund. I have to mention as well here, because Isona, who was taking part in the consultancy, also came from World Cinema Fund, and the project was part of that new program that World Cinema Fund is doing together with Torino Film Lab. The second plan would have been a world premiere in Rotterdam. And then we obviously looked at the audiences in Argentina, because it's an Argentinian film. So it was clear that we targeted to be released in Argentina. We identified different target and niche audiences. And there you can see that we go from LGBTIQ plus, let's say, audience to niche audiences like parents of teenagers or younger children who want to learn about youth social issues and parenting for LGBTQI kids. Yeah, or we have people who want to impress their partners as a queer date movie, you know, and intellectuals who are interested in social issues. So this is like something, as you can see, you can get very detailed and from broad to detail in the same time. Look at it from a very broad angle, but also from a very detailed angle in the same time. zooming in and out constantly, basically, is a very important practice as well in audience design. We did the same for Germany, and then proposed concrete actions, like what to do on the festivals, what to do for the cinematic release in Argentina, in Germany, and this is something that is really very nice as well, and very important, I think, to think of personas, because that's what I mean with engaging with the audience. The more you detail your understanding of the audience, the more you think of the audience, the more it becomes interesting. So you're really thinking of personas. Who are these people who might like the film? And we collected these different people and really wrote their, let's say, we wrote down who they are, like quite detailed, like a teacher from Rosario who teaches literature at National University, and so on. But then also how she would become an audience, how she would see the film. And this really inspires very much the strategy, but also the whole idea of audience design, to really understand the audience from a more like a holistic point of view, but in the same time being really like detailed about it. So we collected lots of these different personas, as you can see, but also thought about people who might not like the film. These are, as you might see, white old males that don't like the film, because it's like a queer film. So we kind of thought of like heterosexual old men that would not like the film. But it's also interesting to think of them and why we think they don't like the film, and maybe we can come over this idea, and maybe we find ways how to inspire them and to maybe change their mind, because maybe that's also one of the goals of the filmmaker. So it's and then obviously we have a timeline, which is as you saw before, this whole idea of proposing actions, but also like being clear about when to do the actions and what is feasible. This was, as I said, in September 2019, and we said like, what is a to-do list? Because obviously, like, there's always some more things to do. So that as I said, this strategy paper here is something that you constantly work on. And the nice thing was that actually it worked out. This is now the situation of Las Mil y Una, even though we have a pandemic. It was premiering in Berlinale. It was actually the opening film of Panorama, and we were very happy about that. I can't say how much the audience design played a role in that. Nevertheless, we attached the world sales as well before the Panorama to the film, who gave us the feedback that they really could work very well with this paper. It really helped them to work with the film, because they had this strategy paper already where we had lots of different, like, already log lines, synopsises, and themes, basically good starting points for the world sales to start their work with the film. And it had a really successful festival run. As you can see, these are the festivals and awards that the film won so far. And obviously, we didn't think of the pandemic in September 2019, so we couldn't really adjust our strategy towards that. But nevertheless, the film did really well, and in that sense, the goals, as you remember, were quite well met with the strategy, and basically, all the goals were fulfilled, I would say. All the main goals. Again, I'm not sure how much this is because the film is just a really amazing film, or because we did the audience design strategy. Maybe both of it. Ideally, both played a role in that. So another project that I shortly would like to look into, even though I know I'm already almost over with my time. It's called Cuban Dancer. It's a documentary, 90 minutes. It's about a young dancer from Cuba moving to the US with his family, trying to make it big in the world of ballet in Havana, and then moving obviously to the US, and then becoming a dancer in the US, trying to be in the competitive world of ballet in the US. basically I realized that I didn't tell you what Las Mil y Una was really about. It basically, I can tell you later if you're still interested, but I can also share with you the trailer. And anyway, you should watch the film, so I'm not giving away the story so far. We did the same, but as I said, this is very interesting because first of all, it's a documentary, and second, this was another setup. I did this consultancy together with Rima Rebrück. She's an audience designer from Belgium, and basically we met here in March 2020. No, we met here during Berlinale 2020, this year as well. So with the producer from Italy. And the director wasn't here, but we had the producer from Italy here. As I said, I did the consultancy together with Rima. So it was a consultancy as part of the Torino Film Lab Audience Design Fund. It's now set up, which is normal in Torino Film Lab. You have 2 audience designers attached to a project. And as you can see, the goals were the main goals: reaching a young audience, reach dancers, athletes, sports enthusiasts, become a popular film in South America, reach the Hispanic diaspora, create awareness on immigration, reunification, and integration, and secure an international premiere in a festival. So, as you can see, quite different in that sense goals than Las Mil y Una. And also the as you can see here, the strategy already has a different kind of outlook. So you can see audience design is never really the same. It always is a bit different. Even though I was involved in both consultancies and obviously put a little bit my approach towards audience design in. But Rima, for example, she has a background in PR for films and series, and she's very strong in strategy. So she really put also her stamp, so to say, on it, how she sees audience design. And that was a very interesting and fruitful collaboration with her. So we have the emotions, for example, as I said, here we have the story where we looked at the emotions. What are the emotions that this film is about? Cuban Dance is a film about passion, love, and the joy of dancing, a movie story about dreams coming true. We looked at values, ambition being the best, mastery, dynamism, and so on. So we identified the values that the film talks about, and again defined different log lines, different synopses, looked at different visuals that we feel are good for the film, like important to communicate with the film, as you can see here, and then looked into the different audiences, and this was the kind of idea that, or like the approach that Rima really brought in, that we identified 5 main discourses that we then would base a strategy on. And the main discourses that we identified were ambition, dance, family, migration, coming of age. And accordingly, we kind of identified 5 main audiences, and that's how we designed the strategy then. High school students and young adults, dancers, athletes, sports enthusiasts, South American moviegoers, Hispanic communities in diaspora, Cuba lovers, teachers, activists, politically engaged, people with migration background, and then, of course, as always, the art house and festival audience / festival programmers. Because the film was just now basically finished. It just premiered, I think, 2 weeks ago in Rome Film Festival. Obviously, the whole distribution changed because of the pandemic. Nevertheless, we were quite happy now with the premiere, and the film was really well received. So that's very nice. Anyway, this is obviously like the strategy that we identified, actions, channels, and partnerships, and went into more detail into these campaigns, how to reach these different core audiences that we identified. So the youth, students, and teachers, the dance audience, the South American moviegoers, and yeah, again, the timeline, which became a little bit like, as I said, in February, we really didn't think that the pandemic will hit as much as it did at the end. So it kind of didn't work, but we looked back into it. And as I said, this document is reflecting March, the beginning of March, when we released it. So it's not really the actual state, and it was definitely like changed since the pandemic took off like it did. Okay, so briefly, that was it so far. So now I can come back to your questions, basically. Let's see.
So I'm back.
Hello, Rafael.
Benjamin, for the...
I hope it wasn't too fast. Was it okay?
No, it was quite okay. And amazing class. I really like the way you structured. It's also very interesting, I think, that how this content can be useful in all the different stages of the film, from the development, the financing, in the rough cut stage, and the festival stage, and the distribution stage, depending on the territory and everything. And this reflection connects me to the first question we had, which is very similar. So I'm putting together two questions, one from Daniela from Moveo Films and another one from Damian Sanz. How do you recommend to work on audience design or audience engagement during the development stage?
How to use audience design during the development stage?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a tool for audience engagement, I understand.
Mm-hmm. Basically, as I said, these iterations that I showed you, going through, like being basically always in a mode of drafting. It really goes along with the script stage. I mean, you know how it works with story development. You have a first idea, then you have a first draft of the script, or you have a first draft of the treatment when you have a documentary, and then you go into production, and the story changes basically all the time, as I said before. So and the way the story changes, also the audience changes. So basically in development, you have a first draft of the audience. Like you collect according to the story how it is. Then you can already identify different themes. You can identify different topics that the story talks about, and you can already like have an idea who could be the person that likes this kind of story and who doesn't like this kind of story. And as more the let's say financing of the film is going, you can then already like use this let's say idea of the audience. When you talk to co-production partners on a festival, for example, you're trying to bring in people in the financing phase, and then you can already use this knowledge because you were thinking of audience already. As you know, also for film funds these days, you also need to have an idea of the audience, and the more you are detailed about that, the more you are like already knowledgeable about the better it is. Basically, in development, it's the same as you would do when the film is finished, only that you're then not having a finished film, but maybe just a script in the first draft or a treatment, and you do the same as if this film would be like as it is now. So you think of the audience of the film that I'm interested in it in the same way as if the film would be finished already. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe.
Is that clear, or?
Yeah, I think so. For me it's clear. There's another person, like JJ2020. I don't know the name. He has a question asking that okay, when you in that slide that you show the audience engagement in each stage, there was one stage for festivals, in general for film. He believes, of course, yeah, it's for film. But he would like to know specifics of audience design for series or web series. Do you have some information on that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, basically the whole series, as you know, works differently in terms of partners. You don't have so much like festivals don't play such a big role in series. It really is about finding a good network or finding a streaming partner that is then delivering. And obviously, if you work together with Netflix, for example, they have their own huge department on audience engagement, and they will just basically do this for you. But in terms of web series, it's very interesting because here it really is about the slide that I showed before. Maybe I can go back to it shortly. The slide about the active audience, and that's especially for web series, I would say, a very important thing, because here this slide I meant, because basically, especially when you're talking about a web audience, an online audience, you can really start to engage them on a very early stage of development by, for example, if you identify certain topics that this series will be about. That also goes for films, but especially like if you have thinking about web series, if this series talks about a certain topic or relates to a certain genre, you can then already look into online communities who are into this kind of genre. For example, I had producers of web series that were doing a very small web series that kind of same as some Shakespeare drama that was set on an island in Italy, and they just basically targeted. They were looking into people on Facebook, into and this kind of storytelling, who liked this kind of special narrative that they were looking at, and they engaged them and they said, look, there's a web series coming out soon that talks about exactly this, and then they really had this active audience by the time of release. And because it's so easy to make the transition between, let's say, Facebook or Instagram and the actual web platform where the series was released, it really worked really well. So because here especially digital marketing or digital audience engagement works really well and for web series. As I said, for the, let's say, big drama series that you would do together with Amazon or Netflix, that's a whole different story, I would say. Because I think already while you are producing it, they will take a lot, because they already understood this whole idea of audience design maybe much better than we in the art house independent world do, because they actually built their whole business model on that idea that they do things for an audience and they want to keep their audience engaged. So basically, yeah, we only are independent, let's say, art house world. We still have to come into terms with that a little better.
Okay. So somehow the next question is connected with the data issue. Monica is asking, what's the profile for the professionals working in that field, researchers with which background? And then she also asks, during the research, do you work with metadata?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, basically, for me as a researcher, for me it is. I'm not so much interested in, let's say, data, but that's very much my specific take on it. I really believe in the, let's say, story and understand the story first, and then from the story, get interested in it, and that's more like a telling rather than really looking into evidence or look into big data. But obviously, there's many ways where you can look into data as well. Like it starts with a very clear, like a very simple internet research. For example, which films were successful in that territory, and you can really get all these numbers from. In Europe, we have different platforms where you can see which films did well in which territory, and obviously you can also do what we call netnography. So you go into the internet and you look into the different communities and how they talk about things. When you, for example, identify that the film has a specific angle on, let's say, music, hip hop, And then you go into the hip hop communities and you look into, like as an ethnographer, you go into this internet communities and you see how they talk. And then you also take the numbers. How many people are actually engaged in this community? How big is that Facebook group? How big is that blog? How many followers that blog has? And you kind of collect this. But that's traditional social media marketing. In a way. Audience design goes a little bit beyond that. So we are not only using metadata. Metadata can be used, but it's not the answer, because for audience design, very important is really, as I said, the story, and to really understand the story and really try to be a bit more creative with that than just using the raw data, so to say. So it can be used, but it doesn't have to be used. It can also be using the, let's say that the swarm intelligence of the people present there and their experience. For example, as I said, if we are together in the audience design consultancy with distributors and producers, they all have their different experiences and they bring that to the table, so they can speak about from their own experience and bring that onto the table. So and then you can also do the data research on top, but it's not only driven by data. I think that's a very important thing, because, for example, Netflix, what they do, they are completely driven by data. They only look at data, basically. And an audience design is really something that we really take into consideration the story much more. And the other question that you had about the professionals that do audience design, I would say, yeah, as I said before, it could be, you could do it as a script writer, you can do it as a director, but then your angle would be obviously more the story, and you can also do it as a distributor or as a producer. Then your angle would be maybe more like the audience. So you know, there's different backgrounds that, and I think the more diverse the backgrounds are, the better it is. So basically everybody can do it. Like in the Torino Film Lab audience design program, we have people who are now audience designers who have a background in script writing. Some others have a background in cinema. Some other have a background in distribution. Others in production, as me. Some others in other fields in the film industry. So it's very diverse, basically.
Wonderful. And there's another question which it's quite interesting, following this line. Andre is asking if I'm translating while I read, if it's possible to build a global audience, even if the project or the film or deals with something really specific from, for example, a Brazilian city. I mean, to create an audience.
Yes and no, I would say. I think you have to be really specific about the local, let's say, culture. Nevertheless, there are always topics that are kind of talking to different audiences. As I used the example of Aquarius, being a film about gentrification that would be seen in Berlin differently than in Solo, I'd say. On the other hand, you really have to be sure that you then communicate to the audience in Berlin differently than to the audience in Sao Paulo. And I mean, you know this from Netflix is quite a good example as a global company who has content that is globally distributed, but really communicates it very differently in all the different territories, and even to different, like as you might know as well, that each, you know, like each landing page of Netflix is different for every person, because they even have different thumbnails for each different kind of audience group. So you have to be very specific, I would say, and I think making a story fit is never the right answer. So you never should try to make a story fit to the different territories. If you see that there's not an angle that might be interesting for certain people in this territory, then better not trying to make it fit and say, look, this might not even talk to you, but this is generally an interesting story. So maybe it's not about the themes and topics that will be engaging for different audiences, but maybe just the fact that it's an amazing, interesting film that you should look at, because it tells you a lot about the Brazilian situation of today. And then you would maybe more target people that are interested in Brazil, rather than in that specific topic that you try to adjust to the other territory. So really, it's really about being specific about the story first, and not trying to make something fit that doesn't fit, but really think of the audiences, where they come from, and their local specifics. And also, what I think is really important is that you should really not understand, let's say, me trying to understand audiences, because I've been in Brazil once, as a tourist, but that doesn't make me understanding the Brazilian market. So it's really important, for example, like the consultancy we just had now with Rafael. It was very important that Rafael was there from Brazil, because he understands Brazil much better than obviously I do. So that's very important, to also have people involved in the strategy that really know that this territory.
Nice. There are two questions that I think that somehow we already answered, but if we could come back and just to recheck that it's clear, like Felipe is asking if the personas are real people or not, and no, they are hypothetical profiles to think the strategy. I'm already answering, making the question, but then I will connect with Gustavo Maximiliano, who says, which tools or service do you consider useful for this process? Like how to interact and generate, again, data about the audience experience with the film. Somehow I think that we already answered that during like the net ethnography and all the community part, but it would be nice to recap that, saying a little bit about persona and how to build these idea of the diverse audience for the film.
Yeah, the personas are not real people. These are people that we think of. It's basically like a narrative that we're building there. It's almost like a fiction of people but that should be based on our personal experience. So people we think are existing and that are engaged with the film or not, because we believe they are engaged with it because of their own tendency system, as I said before. Because they are teachers, they might. Sorry, there's a police driving by. Basically, because of people, we understand. We try to understand or imagine people that might be interested in the film or not, and we draft them, we detail them, based on our own experience. But you can also do that based on data research. For example, if you in Germany, for example, we have lots of statistics about cinema, where they come from, and then for example, we know that certain comedies are looked at by people between 18 and 29, and then we take this information and then we think of a person like that, and we can fuel this information by either thinking of them, or we can fuel this information, as I said before. You go into a blog where 29-year-old people in Berlin are hanging out that are talking about hip hop, as I said, or talking about fashion, and you look at these people and you follow them a little bit and see what kind of language they speak, what they're into, and then you can put this persona based on much more real, let's say, data. You can also just base it on something not real at all. But obviously, the more research it is, the better it is, and the best is especially if you just take people that you know. Basically, people that are your friends and that you really know a lot about in detail, and then you see, and then you put this persona next to the story, and you think, is that fitting or is that not fitting? Would that person be engaged with the film or not? And then you already have a very strong, like new, let's say, insight into the relationship between the story and the audience. So, yeah, it's a very free, let's say, exercise, and as I said, you can use data, or you don't have to use data, or you can use very much your lived experience, which is most of the time the most accurate one.
Wonderful. We are reaching the end, but there's another question here from Daniela Moveu Films. In audience design, do you later check the results of the engagement? A little bit what you said about also the debrief. If so, how do you make this verification?
Yeah, basically, with the Torino Film Lab, there's always the film team that took part in the audience design consultancy has to write a report and a feedback about how this whole process worked and how actually the strategy was successful or not. And this is obviously just also because of the funding, because we have to, like, audience design has to also show to the funding partners that it worked or in what ways it worked and in what ways it didn't. But on the other hand, obviously, it's very important for us to get this feedback so we can adjust the strategy. Like, for example, this project I talked about shortly before, Tel Aviv on Fire, which obviously this report can only be done after a certain time. So for Las Mil y Una, it would be a little bit too early, for example, for Cuban Dance as well. Normally, these reports are written like a year after the distribution really was done. And for this Tel Aviv on Fire project, they were, for example, super happy about how everything worked, because it really helped them for the digital strategy, because they had identified this different personas and different audiences, so they could really target them in their digital strategy. There were other consultancies where my colleagues, frankly, were a little bit frustrated because this strategy was developed and then they felt it was just put into a drawer and never looked at again. This can also happen, obviously, because the film team didn't feel like there were enough resources, or the distributors were not involved in a way that they took part, that they actually used this strategy. With UN, it was great because the world actually used and we liked to have that resource. In other cases, it was that the world said, "Oh, we have our own thing. We don't care about what you said there in the audience design." So it can go both ways. But again, it's really important to evaluate, because these are important findings. And for example, these cases where distributors or world sales were not taken care, did not take care about what the audience design strategy proposed, we then came up with a system that we involved them better, because basically it's really important to involve them from the very start.
Amazing. And the last one, Stefano is asking if you can make a recommendation, like for a website that inform which film was successful in which territory and type of audience. I think that maybe there's, I don't know any website with such specific information, but maybe there are someone with the box office in different territories and somehow how to cross this information or something.
Yeah, and in Europe we have a very good website. It's called the European Audiovisual Observatory, and it basically shows all the cinematic numbers in all European countries of all the films that were released in Europe since, I don't know, 1980 or something. So it is a really, really good resource we have in Europe, because the European Union is taking care about this thing. I'm not sure about, I don't know anything like that in South America, unfortunately. Otherwise, you obviously have the website that you pay for as a distributor. It's called Rentrax/IBOE, International Box Office. But you have to pay for that. That's a subscription site. I have that for Germany, and that's really already for the German market. I think only it shows you real-time data about box office in German theaters. It's 200 euros, I think, per month, and for this. So there are obviously, but some of them are like the one with the European Observatory. It's for free. It's from the European Union. The other one is paid, and obviously people like Netflix, they don't give data out, unfortunately, at all. So that's the big problem with series and the intransparency of Netflix. And if you want to, and I can show, I wanted to share anyway with you, if you want to show my slides again. On the you can look at the audience design book, which you can download. First of all, you can look. You can also contact me on my homepage, which is benjamincölle.de, written together. And there you can also find the contact. So if you have any questions more, you can obviously write me an email. And here's the audience design book. Maybe you can share it in the YouTube channel.
Yeah, we can
this link. So this is the book where you can download the audience design book, which gives you really like a good overview about how audience design is done in Torino Film Lab.
Wonderful. We are sharing the link in the chat. Also, there's a website called Comscore, which is a global, website and a company for box office information. Here in Brazil, Stefano, we have Filme B, which is also a source of information. They have the box office of the films, and Ancine has OCA, which is Observatório do Cinema Audiovisual. Actually, Ancine right now is a bit strange, but OCA is still there, and you can find the information from Brazilian films and also foreign films. Okay, Benjamin, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure.
Muito obrigado, pessoal, pela presença. Apenas um anúncio que a nossa programação continua. A programação do REACH está apenas começando. Hoje, às 16 horas, a gente tem uma palestra com a Sarah Moses, distribuidora britânica, sobre distribuição de impacto. Na próxima semana, encontros com Sara Silveira, Ademar Oliveira, Eric Rocha, numa mesa para discutir perspectivas para o cinema brasileiro. Uma mesa maravilhosamente organizada em parceria com o Industry Academy, com as programadoras da quinzena, do Festival de Mar del Plata, do Festival de Roterdã, para falar sobre o trabalho de programação. Uma mesa também muito interessante dos profissionais da Curzon, falando sobre como criar um ambiente para que o cinema e o VOD coexistam no mundo. Uma mesa com plataformas como Mubi, Spamflix, Cabinet, construindo públicos de nicho no ambiente digital. E ainda uma palestra de Sara Calderon sobre o marketing de cinema em 2020. Thank you so much. Muito obrigado. See you later. And thank you, Benjamin. And
bye bye. Thank you.
Bye bye.